Last time I talked about the 7 levels of financial freedom, where you are, what each level actually feels like. And I told you honestly that I'm somewhere between level 0 and level 1. Working on it, not there yet. And I got a question I want to address before anything else. Not from a comment, just from my own thinking afterward. Okay, so now I know where I am on the ladder. Now what? Knowing your level is the map, but a map without a route is just a picture. So today I want to talk about the route. The 7 steps that actually move you from wherever you are, up. Not a theory, not a generic plan from a finance textbook that assumes you have no debt, no kids, and perfect discipline. A real framework, built on something specific, and layered with my own experience of trying to walk it. What worked, what didn't, and what I still haven't fully solved. Because I think the honest version of this is more useful than the polished version. One thing I want to say before we start. These 7 steps are not sequential in the way that a recipe is sequential. You don't finish step 1 completely before you touch step 2. Life doesn't work like that. You work on multiple steps at once. You make progress in one area while you're still struggling with another. What the framework gives you isn't a rigid order. It gives you a direction for each area that needs attention. And sometimes, just naming the area, understanding that this specific thing is a step and that it has a direction, is enough to start moving. That's all I'm offering today. A direction for each step. The movement is yours to make. And as always, nothing in this video is financial advice. I'm a 38-year-old dad working from home, thinking out loud. Talk to a professional for your specific situation. This is just experience and observation. Take it for what it is. Step 1. Recognize your limiting beliefs. And I want to be careful here because this phrase, limiting beliefs, has been so thoroughly colonized by self-help culture that it's almost impossible to say it without sounding like you're about to sell someone a course. So let me say it differently. The money story you grew up with is running your decisions right now, whether you know it or not. I'll tell you mine. I grew up in a household where money was tight. Not dramatically tight, not hungry, not desperate, but tight in the way that creates a specific atmosphere, where certain purchases were just off the table, where the future was something that happened to other people, not something you planned for. The story I absorbed, quietly, slowly, through years of observation rather than explicit teaching, was something like this. Money is something you earn and spend. You don't accumulate it. Accumulating is for rich people. Rich people have resources that normal people don't have. We are normal people. This is how it is. I didn't know I believed this. Nobody had said it to me, but I acted on it for years. Investing? Not really for me. Saving seriously? Not really realistic. Long-term wealth building? That's something other people do. And here's what's insidious about a belief like this. It's self-fulfilling. If you believe wealth building isn't for you, if it sits in the category of other people's things, you don't learn about it. You don't try it. You don't make mistakes and learn from them. You just don't engage. And then years pass, and you look up and you've been right, in the sense that you haven't built anything. But you've been right because you never tried, not because you couldn't. The belief created the evidence. I want to give you a few examples of limiting beliefs that I think are extremely common and extremely invisible. I'm not good with money. This one is interesting because it treats a skill as a personality trait. Being good with money is not a quality you're born with. It's a set of habits and knowledge that can be learned. Saying, I'm not good with money, is like saying, I'm not good at driving, before you've taken a lesson. You need money to make money. Technically, there's truth in this, but it's used mostly as a reason not to start. Because the implication is, since I don't have much, there's no point beginning. This is false. The people who reach level 4 or 5 almost universally started small and built over a long time. Investing is too risky. For a specific kind of investing, in specific conditions, this is true. For buying broad index funds and holding them for decades, the historical risk is significantly lower than most people assume. The belief is based on a misunderstanding of what investing means, and it keeps people in cash while inflation quietly erodes what they have. It's too late to start. I hear this from people in their 30s, sometimes their 20s. the math doesn't support it. Starting at 35 with consistent contributions to an index fund is not ideal compared to starting at 25, but it is dramatically better than starting at 45, or not starting at all. The reason step 1 comes first, before goals, before strategies, before any concrete action, is that a limiting belief is an invisible ceiling. You can have the best strategy in the world. You can have clear goals. You can have genuine motivation, and the ceiling will still stop you, because you'll unconsciously make decisions that keep you below it. You'll self-sabotage in ways that feel, in the moment, like reasonable choices. The ceiling has to come down first, or at least, you have to be able to see it, name it, know it's there, because you can't dismantle something you can't identify. Step 2. Set ambitious goals. And I want to draw a distinction here that I think matters. An ambitious goal is not the same as an unrealistic goal. An unrealistic goal is disconnected from mechanism. It's wishful thinking with a number attached. I want to be a millionaire by 35, said at 34, with no savings and no plan. That's not a goal, that's a fantasy. An ambitious goal is connected to mechanism. It's further than where you are, meaningfully further, not timidly further, but it's reachable through a specific kind of effort over a specific kind of time. The difference isn't the size of the number, it's whether there's a real path from here to there. Here's where I've struggled personally. For most of my adult life, my financial goals were either too vague or too small. Too vague. I want to be financially comfortable someday. No number, no timeline, no mechanism, just a direction. And directions without destinations don't generate decisions. Too small. I want to save 3 months of expenses this year. Fine. Good actually. But it's a maintenance goal. It keeps me at level 1. It doesn't move me toward level 3 or 4, which is where I actually want to be. The goal that changed something for me, the one that finally felt like a real goal, was when I calculated for the first time what my FIRE number actually was. The specific amount of invested assets that would make my family financially independent. It was a big number, significantly bigger than anything I'd ever thought about concretely. And instead of feeling defeated by it, which I expected, I felt something else, oriented. For the first time, I had a destination, not a vague, better future, a real number that represented something specific, the point at which work becomes optional for me and my family. That number changed how I thought about every financial decision, not because I was suddenly going to reach it fast. I'm not. It will take years, maybe a decade and a half, if everything goes reasonably well. But I was no longer making decisions without knowing what I was building toward. And that's what an ambitious goal does, when it's the right kind of ambitious. It makes the present decisions legible. One practical thing, write it down. Not in an app, not in a spreadsheet. Write it, on paper. A sentence or two about what you're building toward and why. The research on this is consistent and has been for decades. Goals that are written down get acted on at significantly higher rates than goals that stay in your head. I'm not going to tell you why the psychology works. I'm just telling you it does. And the cost of writing it down is 1 minute. Step 3. Improve your daily habits. And I want to separate this immediately from the kind of productivity content that tells you to wake up at 5 a.m. and journal and cold plunge and meditate and somehow this will make you wealthy. That's not what this is. What this is, specifically, is the small, repeated decisions you make every day are the material your financial life is built from. Not the big decisions, not the dramatic moments, the small ones, the default ones, the ones you make without fully thinking about them because they've become automatic. Those are the habits. Let me be specific about the habits that matter most in a financial context. The first is tracking. Do you know, with reasonable accuracy, where your money goes each month? Not to the penny, reasonable accuracy. The broad categories, the big lines. Most people don't. And this is not a character flaw, it's a design flaw. Money moves in and out in so many ways, through so many channels, that without some deliberate attention, it's genuinely hard to see the full picture. And what you can't see, you can't manage. Tracking isn't a punishment, it's information. And information is what lets you make intentional decisions instead of reactive ones. I tracked seriously for the first time about 2 years ago, and the number that surprised me wasn't the biggest category. I knew roughly what housing and food cost. It was the accumulation of small things I hadn't been seeing clearly. Subscriptions, convenience spending, small regular purchases that I'd stopped noticing because they were automatic. None of them were individually significant. Together, they were a meaningful amount. Seeing it didn't make me feel guilty. It made me feel like I had information I hadn't had before. That's the point of tracking. Here's something specific about tracking when you work from home with kids. The spending that's hardest to see isn't the big monthly bills. Those are clear. It's the daily small decisions that happen in the margins of a busy household. The quick delivery order because nobody wants to cook and the day was already too long. The thing bought impulsively online at 10 p.m. because the screen was in front of you and the willpower was depleted. The small subscriptions that auto-renew so quietly you forget they exist. These are not moral failures. They're the natural result of a demanding life where attention is a limited resource and convenience becomes a survival mechanism. But they add up, and the only way to see them is to track them. Not to judge them, just to see them. Because once you see them, you can decide which ones are worth it. Some are. The delivery order on the genuinely impossible day, maybe that's worth it. The thing you bought at 10 p.m. that you don't remember wanting, maybe not. The habit of tracking gives you the information to make that distinction. Without it, everything is invisible and nothing is chosen. The second habit that matters is the investment habit. Specifically, treating investment contributions the way you treat bills. Not, I'll invest what's left at the end of the month. There's never anything left at the end of the month. The month expands to consume what's available. Instead, a fixed amount moves to investments on a fixed schedule, automatically, before the rest of the money is allocated. This is called paying yourself first. The phrase is old and the concept is simple, but the execution requires converting it from a principle into a habit. A specific, automatic action that doesn't require a decision each time. When it requires a decision each time, it competes with every other use of the money, and it usually loses. When it's automatic, it just happens. Every month, regardless of how the month felt. Regardless of whether you were disciplined or not disciplined in other areas. That consistency, imperfect but unbroken, is what compounds into something significant over years. I want to say something honest about my own habit situation. I am not someone who has mastered this. I have good months and bad months. Months where the tracking is tight and the investment habit runs cleanly and the gap is protected. And months where it all comes loose. Where the spending drifts, the tracking lapses, and I'm reconstructing what happened at the end of the month instead of managing it in real time. That inconsistency costs me. Not catastrophically. I don't go backward in dramatic ways. But it slows the building. What I know about myself is that I need simplicity. The more decisions a system requires, the more places it can break down. The months that work best for me are the months where as much as possible is automated, and the things that require active decisions are minimized. If you're like me, if discipline isn't your strongest asset, design for your reality, not for your ideal self. Simple automatic systems outlast complicated intentional ones. Every time. Step 4 comes back to beliefs, but specifically financial ones. And I want to explain why this appears twice in the framework, because it's not accidental. Step 1 was about general limiting beliefs, the broad stories about who you are and what's possible for you. Step 4 is narrower, more specific. It's about the particular beliefs that operate around money, about how money works, what it means, what's acceptable to want, and what you deserve. These are different from general beliefs, and they can be harder to spot. Here's one that I carried for a long time without knowing it. Money is something to be worried about, not something to be built. This sounds almost too simple. But if you think about what it produces in terms of behavior, it produces constant reactive management of money and almost no proactive building of it. You pay the bills, you cover the costs, you manage the stress of the shortfall or the near miss. And you never quite shift into a mode where you're building something intentionally, because money is for surviving, not for accumulating. When I say I carried this belief, I mean it shaped how I thought about my finances for years in ways I couldn't see. I wasn't lazy, I wasn't careless. I was working hard and managing reasonably well. But I wasn't building, because somewhere in my operating system, building wasn't part of the model. Another common one, talking about money is uncomfortable or inappropriate. In many cultures and families, including mine, discussing money in specific terms was just not done, not openly. You could complain about not having enough in vague terms, but actual numbers, actual plans, actual explicit conversations about wealth, that was considered either boastful or tasteless. The result of this is that you grow up without a language for money. You can't talk about your goals clearly because you haven't practiced. You can't compare notes with people you trust because the topic feels off limits. You can't learn from other people's real experience because nobody talks about their real experience. And in the absence of real conversation, you fill the gap with assumptions, usually the most conservative, most limiting assumptions available. Because the information vacuum gets filled by fear. The practice of step 4 isn't complicated, but it's slow. It involves noticing, as often as possible, when a financial belief is operating underneath a decision. Not to immediately override it, just to see it. I'm not going to invest that money because investing is risky. Okay, is that true? What kind of investing? What's the actual historical risk of the thing I'm considering? Or am I applying a general fear to a specific situation without examining whether the fear fits? Most of the time, when I actually examine the belief rather than just acting on it, I find that it's at least partially wrong, sometimes significantly wrong. And the act of examining, of making the belief conscious rather than automatic, creates a moment of choice where there was no choice before. That moment is the opening. You don't have to choose differently every time, but having the moment is the beginning of being able to. Step 5 is where the internal work of steps 1 through 4 starts to produce something external and concrete. Define your financial goals. Not the vague version, I want to be financially secure, but the specific version, the version with numbers, timelines, and mechanisms attached. And I want to say something here about why this step comes after the belief work rather than before it. Because most people, when they try to set financial goals before examining their beliefs, set goals that are shaped by their limitations rather than their actual possibilities. They set goals that feel realistic, which often means goals that don't require them to do anything significantly different from what they're already doing. And safe goals produce safe progress, which usually means slow progress, which usually means not reaching the level you actually want before time runs out. What does a real financial goal look like? It has a target, a specific number or condition. It has a timeline, not someday, a year or 5 years, or by the time the oldest kid starts university. And it has a mechanism, the thing you'll actually do, specifically, that moves toward the target. For me right now, the goals look like this. The near-term goal, a real emergency fund. Specific amount, specific timeline. Funded through a specific automatic monthly transfer that I've already set up. The medium-term goal, investment contributions that reach a specific percentage of monthly income. The percentage that, held consistently over the next decade, gets me within range of my FIRE number. The long-term goal, the FIRE number itself. The point at which the passive income from my investments covers my family's actual costs. Each of these has a number, each has a timeline, each has a mechanism. None of them are, I want to feel financially comfortable someday. Something I want to acknowledge, for people in difficult financial situations, people at level -1, living with real immediate pressure, this step can feel almost insulting. Define your goals is easier to say when there's room to breathe. When the immediate pressure is severe, the only goal that matters is getting through the month, getting to level 0. And I think that's legitimate. I'm not going to tell someone whose electricity might get cut off that they should be thinking about their fire number. But I will say this: the moment the immediate pressure eases, even slightly, the moment there's any margin at all, that's the moment to start defining something beyond the immediate. Not perfectly, not fully formed, just the beginning of a direction. Because direction, even uncertain direction, is better than the absence of one. Step 6 deepens what Step 3 started. Step 3 was about improving daily habits. The small decisions, the tracking, the automatic investment contribution. Step 6 is about transformation, which is a bigger word, and I want to use it carefully. Transformation doesn't mean becoming a different person. It doesn't mean having perfect discipline or never making a bad financial decision again. It means that the default, the automatic setting, the thing you do without thinking, has changed. At the beginning, the default is spend. The money comes in and it goes out in the directions it's been going for years. Tracking requires effort. Saving requires a decision. Investing requires significant activation energy. After Step 6, not immediately, but over time, with consistency, the default shifts. The automatic thing becomes tracking. The money moves to investments before you have a chance to spend it. The question you ask about a purchase changes from, "Can I afford this?" to, "Does this serve what I'm building?" That shift, from conscious effort to unconscious default, is what transformation means in this context. It's not dramatic. It doesn't happen in a weekend, but it happens if you do the work long enough, consistently enough. I want to be honest about where I am with this. Some of my defaults have shifted. The investment contribution is automatic. It happens without a decision. My awareness of where money goes has changed. I have a clearer picture than I did 3 years ago. Other defaults have not fully shifted yet. The spending that responds to stress. The month that gets loose when things are difficult in other areas. The moments when the discipline lapses, not because I've forgotten the goals, but because carrying the discipline costs more than I have available in that moment. Those are still there. I'm still working on them. And what I've stopped doing, which I think is important, is treating those lapses as evidence that I'm failing. They're not evidence of failure. They're evidence of being human, building something difficult, in imperfect conditions. The question that matters isn't whether the month was perfect, it's whether the direction is maintained. Imperfect consistency over years produces results. Perfect discipline that breaks completely is just a story you tell yourself before you quit. Step 7. Build wealth. And I want to say something about this phrase that might seem obvious, but I think isn't. Building wealth is not the same as earning money. We use the words almost interchangeably, but they describe completely different activities. Earning money is trading time and skill for income. You work, you get paid. When you stop working, the income stops. Building wealth is creating assets, things that generate value or income independently of your active labor, things that work when you're not working. The difference between these two activities is the difference between level 0 and level 4 on the ladder. At level 0, you earn money, you spend money, you earn more money, you spend more money. The cycle continues as long as you're able to continue it. At level 4, you've built enough assets that the assets generate the income. The cycle continues whether you're working or not. The path from one to the other is Step 7. Now, what does building wealth actually look like practically for a regular person? Not a hedge fund manager, not a tech entrepreneur with stock options. A regular person, with a family, with expenses, with income that's real but not spectacular. The mechanism that works for most people, the one with the longest track record, the lowest cost, and the most evidence behind it, is index fund investing. Specifically, buying a broadly diversified fund that tracks the overall market, something like the global stock market or the S&P 500, and holding it for years, decades, without trying to time the market, without switching strategies every time something feels uncertain, just holding. This is not exciting. That's part of why it works. The lack of excitement removes the temptation to interfere. Markets go up and down. Specific companies rise and fall. But the broad market, over long enough time horizons, has historically trended upward. Not smoothly, not without painful periods, but upward. And the compounding that happens during that long hold, the growth on growth, the returns reinvested and growing themselves, is what produces the kind of wealth that can eventually cover a family's expenses without anyone working. I want to say something about the timeline, because I think unrealistic expectations are one of the most common reasons people quit. This is slow. I mean genuinely slow. The kind of slow that tests your patience in ways that feel almost unfair. In the first few years, the numbers are small. The growth is real, but invisible against your income. You're contributing, you're holding, you're doing everything right, and the account balance looks like it barely moved. This is not a sign that it's not working. It's the nature of compounding in its early stages. The early years are the planting phase. The growth comes later, and it comes faster than the early years would suggest. The people who stick with this, who continue through the years when the numbers are unimpressive, are the ones who eventually look at their accounts and see something that surprises them. Not because something dramatic happened, because time happened. And time, combined with consistent building, is the mechanism. One more thing about Step 7. It doesn't require you to have everything else figured out first. You don't need perfect habits. You don't need zero debt to start. You don't need your beliefs fully resolved or your goals perfectly defined. You need a small amount of money moving, automatically, into a simple, diversified investment on a regular schedule. That's the minimum viable version of Step 7. It can coexist with imperfection in every other area, because the most important variable in compounding isn't the amount. It isn't even the strategy, it's the time. And the time starts when you start. 7 steps, 1 through 7. And I want to be honest about something before I close. I haven't finished this journey. I'm somewhere in the middle of it, working on multiple steps at once, making progress in some areas, still struggling in others. Step 1. I've done a lot of this work. The limiting beliefs are named. Not fully gone, they don't fully go, but visible. Step 2. I have a real goal, a number, a direction. Step 3. Inconsistent. Some habits are solid, others still break under pressure. Step 4. Ongoing. The financial beliefs that run quietly underneath decisions. I'm still catching them, still examining them. Step 5. Defined. The goals are written. Step 6. Partial transformation. Some defaults have shifted, others haven't yet. Step 7. Started. Not far along, but started. That's an honest accounting. And I think an honest accounting is more useful to you than a version of this where I'm presenting it from the finish line. Because if you're somewhere in the middle of this, if you're working on multiple steps at once, doing well in some areas and still struggling in others, that's not failure. That's the process. The process is slow. It's imperfect. It doesn't resolve cleanly, but it moves. And moving, even slowly, even imperfectly, is the whole game. Take care.